Her mother, Viola Moriarty, was a member of AAUW. The first meeting that she ever came to before she was a member, it was at Judy Murphy's house, might have been Jennifer Kern's house. And this speaker was Annie Raskin, who was teaching the graphic novel at MCLA at the time. And Viola came because she also is an artist and a drawer and a writer, and was dabbling in the kind of art that goes back and forth between writing and drawing. So she came just because she was interested in the speaker. And the questions and what Viola, as a non-member, but listening to the talk with Annie, was added so much depth to the conversation and the dialogue that I think it was a memorable evening for everybody who was there. And right after that, Viola joined as a member of our branch. And she died of cancer in 2013. But boy, did she ever go out chronicling her experience of being diagnosed, treated for, remission, treated for, and finally dying with breast cancer. And the way that she was able to explore her experience, I hope that's okay, and if I'm speaking at this level of sort of candor, I think for it was really eye-opening for me, and my first experience really with it. I own a painting. I know her paintings, but was she created the character Reentry Girl, in which she kind of compared somebody who's gone through this experience with cancer. I may be wrong; it's been quite a few years, but like with Jane Goodall, going into the jungle and being gone and away from civilization as we know it in a completely different world, and what it's like then to re-enter, using cancer as the the kind of the re-entry vehicle. So when we decided to do this whole theme year of diversity and inclusion, I followed Anna's work as a artist, a drawer, and a comics artist for some time, and it just seemed like she has her fingers on the pulse of a lot of the issues that we're talking about as we try to figure out an inclusive society. So if you, I hope you've been reading her comic books and notice that they are archived there on the newsletter website. So they really are worth going back to and revisiting from time to time. And for me personally, I love everything about your work, Anna, but I think that the way that you have used your two sons and your relationship as the mother of two very young sons as kind of a way to set the stage and the conversation for a number of your comics, to me, has been fascinating. The way we get the perspective of young children and of a mother reflecting on that and engaging in dialogue is very interesting. And I'll also say her artwork really deserves looking at it closely, because she puts a lot of very funny things that are not necessarily a part of the narrative of the comic. The way that writers, if you go to the library and the rare books library, that writers may have marginalia, things that they've written in the margins. Anne is also planting little things in her comics that to me always makes it kind of like a treasure hunt. Anna lives in Williamstown, although she did live for a number of years in Bennington, having moved here when she was young from Colorado, which is really, some ways I'm sure is still your home state, even though you've also lived in Vermont and now live in Western Massachusetts. She's raising two young boys with her husband, and she's not only agreed to be our resident comics artist this year, while we're having diversity and inclusivity as our theme, but also to talk to us today a little bit about the graphic novel as an art form and her relationship with it. Do you have any questions for me before I turn it over to Anna? Anna Moriarty left.
Well, thank you for that beautiful introduction. I appreciate that so much. So as you mentioned, that my mom had kind of started making some comics about her cancer experience. I do have some of those here to share, but I'll just say first that I've been reading comics as long as I've known how to read. My dad brought me my first comic book home from the grocery store, Archie Comics, when I was 7. and I was hooked, and I still have a large collection of Archie comics. But I don't ever remember not reading them, and I always made them when I was little too. I love them so much. And for me, the term graphic novel just means a longer comic book. There's a lot of, we talked a lot about this in college about what is a graphic novel versus a comic book. And for me, the two terms are interchangeable. It doesn't matter. I think the term graphic novel was more put in place to kind of make people take comics more seriously. If you call it a graphic novel, it sounds a bit more serious. It's a novel, it's clearly a novel length. So it gives it a bit more weight in literary circles than saying comic book, which is traditionally thought of as like sort of a pulp thing that you buy in the grocery store, and it's like short and small and like newspaper. But I always call them comic books because I find the term a bit more endearing. So even when I'm reading like a graphic novel, a big serious one like Fun Home, I still call it a comic book just because I prefer the more colloquial term. But I think they're sort of interchangeable. I don't think anything makes something a graphic novel as opposed to a comic book. Some people say that they're always serious, but I don't think that's true. I think you can find a graphic novel that's also quite hilarious and light. And I would still, it could still be called that because it's a book that is long and has pictures in it with the words. And I think the term comic book makes it feel more accessible to everyone as well. Like you don't have to be, I don't know, knowledgeable about anything. Comics are for everyone. So this is a book that my mom and I made together, and it's called Adventures of a Left Breast, because that's where her cancer was first found, was in her left breast. And I was a senior in college at the time and was taking a comic book class and brought home stuff for her, like brought home the books I was reading. And she was like, "Oh, this is awesome. I want to make one." As I'm sure those of you who knew her know her enthusiasm when she's like, "I'm going to do that." And she really does it. She was particularly struck by David Mack, who makes beautiful, beautiful art in his graphic novels. A lot of it is sort of collage based. And his book Kabuki is an absolute favorite of mine, and my mom got really into that one. And he sort of did this collage style in that book that she got really into with some of her stuff. So I don't know how well you can see it, but I'll just show a few pages. Yeah. She mostly drew these all on graph paper, as you can see with the little boxes, and she would paste in doctor's notes, pain charts. She made her own pain chart here. Wow. And just all kinds of different things, along with her drawings, even drawing on her pathology reports. Wow. And just little notes. I included, some of these are just Post-its that were about things she wanted to finish later to draw that she never got to. And I was like, oh, when I was putting this book together after she died, about a year after she died, I kept all of those things in here because they're so her, like this little, I don't know, just her little sticky notes. It says eclipse images. Instead of drawing an eclipse, I was like, let's just put it as she had it at the time. But so the first half is comics about her original diagnosis up through her first surgery and her first treatments. And then the second half of the book is I made about her cancer's recurrence in 2011, when I actually had moved home and lived with my parents. I had moved home from New York City and lived with my parents for a year. Julie will remember fondly driving me home from work at Image. I worked at Image Cinema, and she would drive me home because I didn't drive at the time. But so I made comics about her cancer's recurrence and her eventual death, just through, so we were always making art together about her cancer experience. And so that's just some images from that, but making that stuff together, making art and comics about these difficult things really is what got me into making autobiographical comics. and just using it as a way to process my own experience and as a form of therapy for myself. And then when I started sharing them on the internet, I found other people who had gone through very similar things and who were, you know, connecting to seeing this experience visually. And I don't know, I think comics are a way that you can express difficult things or personal things or funny things, really anything. By using the relationship of text and image, you're able to transcend something, something you can't get just from reading words or just from seeing images. It's really the relationship between the two that's so powerful. And as I was rereading Fun Home, I lost the book jacket to it a long time ago, but I actually like the way the book looks under the book jacket even better. So I was kind of looking at how Alison Bechdel is such an amazing, she's really amazing at using text and image together in a very specific way to share this like incredible story of her family. And if you liked Fun Home, highly recommend her other book, Are You My Mother, which is about her mother. I think it's even better. But yeah, I have a bunch of books next to me in a pile that are recommendations. If anybody read this graphic novel and was like, I love it, now give me more. I have many, many recommendations of lots of different great autobiographical and fiction comics. But I don't know if anyone has any specific questions about anything that you'd like me to talk about. Comics are one of my favorite topics because I've devoted a lot of my life to them and I make them all the time and read them constantly. It's my favorite thing to read. So I definitely can just kind of keep going, but if there's anything anyone has specifically that you want to ask me, I'd be happy to answer. Yeah.
Can I ask about both your process for writing a comic and also Alison's process?
Oh, so yeah. So Alison Bechdel does, and I just know this from reading interviews with her because I'm very interested in, you know, especially female cartoonists, and I like to read a lot about them. So her images are so detailed, and she takes reference photos for everything. Like she would put someone on a bike, take a picture. Like everything that she draws, she sets it up and takes a picture, and she spends like a lot of time planning out her panels. And I think you can really tell from the way that like every gesture of every person feels so real, right? Like it's clearly she set up a person make in that pose so that she could get it right. And she would do that for everything, which is so incredible. Not something I would ever have the patience for because my life has also changed a lot since I had kids, and I have to work very quickly in short spaces of time. So I don't have time to set things up. I don't even use pencil anymore most of the time before inking. I just have to go straight to it, and I just got to be like, I've got 10 minutes. I just had this idea. I just have to do it. But even before I had kids, I still preferred to work more intuitively and more quickly. So sometimes I used reference photos, like I would have a picture of my mom at chemo. I would take a picture. She and I would both be documenting everything. Every doctor's appointment would be like, can we take your picture? And, you know, we'd get permission from the doctors first. But, you know, in order to get what the setup looked like at chemo, I would probably have a reference photo. Maybe I wouldn't draw it exactly as it was, but at least to get the gist of it correct. And then also I did use my bike as a model to draw my actual bike, but I do remember that. But also like, I just think of things in my head as they are too, and just draw the feeling of it more than what it actually looked like. I feel even more so than back when I was making this book. Even more now, I've gone more and more towards a more like emotional drawing rather than getting things exactly as they look. But even just like not bothering to make a doctor look like a person, just a stick figure, because it doesn't matter what the doctor looks like. And also I didn't want to I also was respecting the privacy of local doctors because the doctors in this book we're all from Bennington. So I didn't want to be like, you know, revealing who they really are, even though like we all have the same doctors. But you know, just basically I like to draw in a more simple style that's faster and more intuitive and emotional just for me, because I don't want to spend a long time on one thing. I want to just keep going. And if I think too much, I find I get really stuck. And if I just say, okay, I've only got 10 minutes, let's just do this, then it comes out and I don't overthink it and it comes out better. And I actually teach an adult comics class once a month on Zoom. If anyone's ever interested, I do teach with Artworks, which is a Williamstown art studio run by a local art therapist, who you may know because she also works in Bennington. Her name's Kay Shattuck. And so in the class, I do timed exercises. So you'll have 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes to draw a comic, and you can't think, you can't erase, you just have to go with it. And I find that even when I'm creating final work, I prefer the work that is timed and drawn more quickly, because I don't like fret over it and it doesn't become too overworked. And my mom always used to say, like, when she was making a painting too, you could get to that point where you're futzing with it too much and you overwork it and it's ruined. You have to like go right up to that line and not pass it. So I work much more quickly, although I do take reference photos especially for medical appointments, because there's so many different, you know, I draw a lot about my own medical experiences, as well as my mom's cancer, because we have a genetic mutation that we didn't know before my mom died, but I know that I have it. So I have a lot of doctor's appointments. So I tend to take reference photos for those medical comics. But for a lot of things, I just draw.
Has your style changed over the years since you've been doing comics?
It has. There's certain things that haven't changed, certain things that I think are similar, like the way I draw people. I don't ever draw noses. It's rare I'll draw a nose in a comic. I started doing it that way because noses are hard. And I just wanted to make it easier for myself. So this is how I still draw my mom. When I draw her in, because I draw a lot of comics still about her, about memories or about dreams I have of her. So this is how I still draw her, this circle head, the ears, and I draw the little dots to show her that she's bald. I find that I just do dot eyes, which I find can be very expressive actually in being so simple. And, you know, just keeping it really simple. I try to draw real outfits that people have, which I love. So that's something that hasn't really changed. But one thing that I would say has changed is I've gotten a little bit more experimental. I use a lot more color now. I used to do black and white simply because Xeroxes are cheaper when they're black and white. But now I've sort of like splurged on color. And when it's online, when it's on the internet, you know, doesn't matter if it's color or black and white, you're not printing it. So I use a lot more color, and I think I've loosened my style even a little bit than it was. And I've allowed myself to kind of get a little more experimental. But the way I draw my kids, especially in the comics for the newsletter, you can see they do kind of look like that. I have Giles, I draw his little head, the bangs, the hair, Felix's little head, the curly blonde hair. I try to keep it pretty simple so that I can draw quickly and draw more panels and like with all the people, you know, just to move it along and keep it easier for me to be able to do it. And I just like it. I like that simple style for me, although I love seeing things like Alison Bechdel and like Adrian Tomine. He's a great cartoonist who I just love from the San Francisco area. And his style is so beautiful and detailed. It's not a way that I would ever make a comic, but I think it's just absolutely gorgeous. And I enjoy reading it. I think he takes a lot of reference photos too, like Alison Bechdel.
Which comes first, the picture or the idea that you want to express?
Oh, that's such a great question. So usually for me, I always have a journal around. If I'm leaving the house, I have one in my tote bag. If I'm around the house, I obviously have journals and papers around. And when something happens that I'm like, oh, I feel like there's an idea there, I quickly jot it down, usually with stick figures and some words, just to remember the idea for when the kids aren't around and I have a little bit more time to draw it out. But sometimes an image will come to me first and I'll see it in my head, and then the words will come from the image. Since I mostly work from life, you know, it's things that have happened to me and real things that people said, oftentimes things my children have said or my husband has said, or things that we're having a conversation about. And sometimes I'll even ask my husband. So when I was pregnant, and I did a lot of pregnancy comics with both times, sometimes I was too tired or too pregnant to go get a pencil and write down my idea. And I'd say, Greg, can you just do this a comic about this conversation for me so I can remember it later? And so he would make these adorable little stick figure comics of our conversations that I would then redraw later, which were very sweet, and actually loved his little, I always saved all his originals. He was very sweet and accommodating to do that for me. And that reminds me what Julie was saying about how my lens is of a mother of two young boys. I have found that has deepened my work, and I make more comics now with two kids than I ever have. Make more work now as a mother of two kids than I ever did before I had kids. The summer that I was pregnant with Felix was when I got my first comic like officially published and got money for it. And it was while I was pregnant with him. And then his whole first year of life, I did more work and I thought it would be less. A lot of people told me that once you become a mom, you're not going to have time to be an artist and you're just going to give it up. And I said, no, that's not true. And in fact, I've had more inspiration, more ideas, more work come out of me. It just in less time. I've just become much more efficient and productive. But the lens of being a mother is very important to me. And I think a lot of women in a lot of industries, once they have kids, end up being either pushed out or not respected in the same way, or not listened to in the same way, or you're so busy that you can't like put it, be in your career as much as you want, or that's how it's been in the past. And I feel like as a mother, I feel like my voice really needs to be heard. And I want to hear voices of other mothers, other women in all stages of life. So I find that that's like a really important lens for me.
Where are your comics published? In addition to our newsletter, so that we can see them.
Oh, sure. So I have a couple places. I have a blog that I don't use as much anymore, but a lot of my old comics, especially my ones about my mom, are on there. It's called Lev Hardware. I can type it into the chat. I'll type the address into the chat if anybody wants to.
And can you explain the name Lev Hardware?
Yes. So my dad is from North Adams, John Lev, and his father owned a hardware store where Public, the restaurant Public is now, in North Adams on Holden Street. That used to be his father's hardware store back in the day, which he did not continue after his father retired. And so I took on that name as my professional name. It's like the name for my comics, for my artwork, for everything I make. I decided to use the name Lev Hardware as my sort of storefront, if you will. It's my way of carrying on the family business, kind of. And it's like my tools are paintbrush, paint, pen, paper, and they're my tools for fixing the world. So that's why I use Lev Hardware. So my blog has a lot of my old stuff. And then on Instagram, if anyone uses Instagram, it's at Lev Hardware. That's where I put a lot of things. I actually have a website now, which has some of my stuff. It has a lot of my other work as well as comics. And then for about a year, maybe about a year and a half, there was this really great website, or its online magazine called Spiral Bound, which was all autobiographical comics. It was incredible. I loved reading it. There's so much great work on there. And I had about 12 comics, long form comics published on there, and I got paid for them, which was so great. But then it got shut down. So it's still online. They're just not publishing anything new, but I'll put their website in here too, because there's a lot of great stuff in there. Whoops, that should be all one word. Nope, it keeps separating it. Anyway, Spiral Bound should be one word. It's basically, I think that's correct. It's part of Medium. It was their comic book, their comics section of Medium, which is like mostly articles and stories. So I had my first comic published on there while I was pregnant with Felix, and it was such an incredible experience. This woman who was the editor for that, who ran it, she was really, really cool, and she makes comics herself, and she was just a great champion of like other people's work, and I found such a great home there, getting a bunch of comics published on there, which was such a great opportunity for me to actually get paid and like have it out in a very wide way in the world. So that was like a really great experience.
Anybody else have questions? Well, I do. What's your favorite thing that you didn't write?
My favorite thing that I didn't write. Okay, well, it's hard to pick one, but there's a couple books I've got right next to me here that I wish I'd written. One of them is, okay, this is Jillian Tamaki. She is incredible. She's Canadian. And she has made a lot of incredible work. I recommend all of her books. This is called Boundless, and it's short stories. And they're all in different styles, and they're just beautiful. And the way she tells stories about her childhood. She tells stories about her like ancestors, her grandfather. Like she has comics in the New Yorker from time to time, and there was recently one about one of her, I think it was her grandfather. It's sort of a historical story, and just the way that she uses her images in such an emotional, beautiful way. So this, I think her work, this book in particular, is like one of my absolute favorites. And you can see, yeah, there's so many different styles that she uses. So that would be one of my favorite ones that I didn't write. And then another favorite that I didn't write, who's another person who's made a lot of work that I highly recommend, is Julia Wirtz. She was one of the first autobiographical cartoonists that I really got into. I used to just read her work online on her website. She posted comics almost every day, and I would just go on every day while I was working in offices and to see like, oh, did she have a new comic up today? And just read everything she wrote. A lot of her stuff, I like her sort of simple cartoony style. It's a very consistent style. A lot of her stuff is about her alcoholism and kind of recovering from that. She also writes a lot about her childhood and her history with libraries and how much she loves libraries, and just, I don't know, it's very funny and serious at the same time. And I don't know, I could sit and read everything she wrote and just read it all in one sitting. It moves fast because it's just so, she finds the humor in a lot of different situations. And just her dialogue feels really like flowy and real, and it's funny in the way that I think humor can reveal the darkest things. The darkest moments, I think, can be most revealed by humor, and she does that really well. And she's actually a mother now too. She just had a baby a year ago, and she actually named him Felix. Felix Wolf, which is also the middle name of my Felix, which I find so crazy. We don't know each other.
Wow.
But she just named her son Felix Wolf as well. And now is sort of starting to make some comics about motherhood, which are really interesting. There's actually a lot of great mom cartoonists out there currently that are just, I love that it's taking off in such a big way.
And Linda in the chat has asked her last name, and I think, can you give the full names of those last
Yes,
two
okay.
authors that you just said?
Julia Wirtz and Jillian Tamaki, both of whom I highly recommend. And the other book I was holding up was Adrienne Tomine. And I definitely, so I have like a whole, this is Lucy Knisley. She took her grandparents who were aging on this cruise. So like someone had to go with them. And so she went with her grandparents on a cruise to like help take care of them with their medications and stuff. And just like, you know, her father and his siblings, none of them wanted to do it. So she did it. And I came across this book by accident. I follow Lucy Knisley pretty closely, and she has made some incredible pregnancy and motherhood comics as well. But this is one I would just highly recommend. It's a really beautiful story, and it gives like her grandparents' history, and she kept this travel diary as in comics as they were on this cruise. Really, really beautiful. So I'll put that one in the chat too, because it is just.
I'm thinking of that famous essay that David Foster Wallace did. He had to go on a cruise for a magazine. He said, he entitled it "A Supposedly Fun Thing I'll Never Do Again."
Yes. Yes. So, yeah, those are definitely some ones that I would, big recommendations. And then there's this is a local cartoonist, Charles Foreman. Two of his graphic novels have recently been turned into Netflix series. This is one, it's called Hobo Mom, and it's quite beautiful too. And he has his The End of the Fucking World is a book that he wrote that got turned into a Netflix series, and he's had another one, and he's just like, but he's from Adams. He lives in Adams, Mass.
You have Stuck Rubber Baby there in your pile by any chance?
I don't have it. I actually had borrowed it, and so I don't have my own.
It's at the
copy of
library
it.
too, I think. But, a local Williamstown cartoonist who died a year ago, Howard Cruse, Cruse, is a pioneering queer comic artist. Born in Alabama, raised, his father was a pastor. Howard was gay, and his Stuck Rubber Baby, he actually had a girlfriend back when he was young, and because of a condom problem, she ended up pregnant. And so I think the child was put up for adoption, but he goes on to have a life and become kind of a leader in the civil rights movement. And then this really popular gay cartoonist who just, you know, opened the doors for everybody. He's a hero to Alison Bechdel. But the daughter found him. So it's also a story about finding a birth parent, really, but it's just been reissued, I think, on the 25th anniversary. And his husband, Ed Cedarbaum, who now lives in Williamstown, wrote the new introduction. But I'd suggest having a look for it in your library, Stuck Rubber Baby. It's very political about civil rights, but then this personal undercurrent theme about being gay in the 50s.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful book.
What was the last name of the person that wrote Hobo Mom?
Oh, Charles Foreman. Let me make sure I spelled that right. I just kind of removed it. Oh.
This is really a great list, Anna. Thanks so much. And it looks like Kathy
I always am happy to recommend.
Yeah.
It's in the chat.
Yeah, there's a lot out there.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Anybody have other questions for Anna?
I just have a comment. This is Gudrun. We've shared your comics with the Brattleboro branch, or the whole newsletter, and with Middlebury and Brattleboro both. And the Middlebury branch particularly talked about that it's so fantastic that you use your children to teach. That was the expression they use. And I think that that's really true. And I think it's marvelous.
Well, thank you. Yeah, they're definitely my best teachers, and it's amazing. I'm constantly wishing my mom got to be here to hear all the things they say and do, but every day they say something that like blows my mind, and looking through their eyes and through their questions at particularly the issues surrounding us right now that are about diversity and inclusion and race and gender and all these things, looking at it through them is what teaches me so much more and gets me to ask better questions. So.
And
I'd
teaches us as
like
well.
to know that they're going a little bit further than our branch. So,
Well, thank you
and
so
I
much.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you're teaching us as well. So thank you, children, for us too.
I will thank them. They'll be happy. They'll be happy to know it.
Well, anyone final word for Anna? You're welcome.
Thank you.
As-
Thank you.
As we discuss the book, but I imagine you probably
got
have
it right here with me.
Great.
And my mom loved this book too. We read it. I think we read it at the same time when we first originally read it.
But I have to admit, it's my first graphic novel and I was blown away with it.
Me too.
Okay. Well, Dawn, did you have something you wanted to show us with Alison?
Can you see her on the screen right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is, as you see, 2014, when she was awarded the MacArthur Award, the Genius Award.
No, Dawn.
What I love about cartooning is the way that you have access to these two different kinds of communication. There's language, there's verbal language, which is, I love words, I love writing, I love putting sentences together. But language remains symbolic. It still has to get filtered through our brains. Whereas drawing it's right there, it's immediate, and you just assimilate it without having to think about it. So I love having access to both kinds of communication when I tell my stories. All of the characters in my comic strip, in Dykes to Watch Out For, are actually thinly disguised versions of myself. No matter what they look like, very different. They're all basically me. My comic strip was about a little subcultural group of lesbian friends. And I would just have fun playing them all together, having them debate topics. I would often work current events into my storylines, so they'd be talking about current political topics from their various perspectives, which was a fun kind of dialogue to set up. More recently, I've been writing graphic memoirs about my family. When I came out to my family, when I told my parents I was a lesbian, I learned, to my total surprise, that my father had relationships with other men over the years. And was very secret. He was very secretive about it. And eventually my father killed himself. I wrote this story about my father, and it was painful at times to go back and remember things, to go back and recreate his character, to feel that loss. People often ask me, do you write first or do you draw first? And I do them both at once. I write on the computer in a drawing program. I'm actually creating panels and word balloons on the page. I'll take photographs, I'll steal images from the internet to just sort of paste into my drawing on the computer as a kind of rough sketch. And ultimately, I will draw these images out by hand. When I got the call from the MacArthur Foundation, I thought I was going to faint. It was crazy. It was like someone had actually almost hit me. It was like a physical blow. And I feel like I've been in a state of shock. I think getting this kind of recognition from the MacArthur Foundation, I can feel it already like changing my life. I'm having to adjust to the fact that this has happened. Therefore, I must be doing something worthwhile. And to have that kind of confidence put into my work is a huge gift. And I am going to work very, very hard to live up to those expectations.
Can I stop sharing? Sorry. Whoops, oops. I have no idea what that is.
What are you playing for, son?
I have no idea.
Motivates
I
me.
have no idea what that is. I'm still
Deep
trying to get out.
insecurity. I do think to some extent it is an incomplete.
There, I got rid of it. Okay.
So, what thing struck you the most about your experience with a graphic novel?
I watched a tape of Alison today that she did quite a few years ago with Vermont PBS, and she made a point of she pointed out to the interviewer that it's not a novel, it's a memoir. So anyway, but it is my almost first experience with a graphic book, and wow, I love her art, and I love her humor, and you know, I even love some of the sadness. I felt so touched for her because I went through a similar thing when I was you know, I pre-tween with her OCD and counting things, and anyway, it's a wonderful book. I loved it. Good choice.
Just the powerfulness of many of the incidents, and in some cases it's like one frame just really hit me, and in some cases it's a series in the situation, but the power surprised me in a graphic novel, and it shouldn't, because as she explained, you've got both the words and the pictures, so that sort of doubles impact.
I wasn't always sure what to read first.
That was my problem, actually.
Whether to look at the picture or read the words?
Yeah.
Right.
I found myself doing both. I kind of do an overview, and then I'd read, and then I'd look, and I'd read, and I'd look, and it was a more active experience than just reading a book.
Anna, what's your
One way to put it.
I wanted to know what Anna thought of it. Anna, how do you read?
So I heard a long time ago, someone told me that people's brains read differently, which obviously people's brains read differently, and that some people take in comics in very different ways. For me, it feels so, I don't really notice because I take it in. I just kind of take it all in, and I don't know that I am aware because I've been reading them since I was 7. So it's like reading a book. I don't even know how it would be hard for me to like slow it down and figure out exactly how I read it. And I think it's a training too. So it just flows into my brain kind of fluidly, like I'm reading it and I'm looking at it. Sometimes I go back again. And I think too, someone taught me once that you really have to be aware of where you put the words on the page so that you make people read it the way you want them to read it by the way that you position the words. And so sometimes if it's not super clear where to go, that can like stop me. But if it's in a good flow, I just kind of take it all in at once. And then I'll go back and look at details of the pictures
Yeah, I found that until I really got into it, I would look at the picture and then realize the words were above and I'd skip them. So
Yes, yes.
that, because the picture caught me first. And then as I got into it more, I sort of remembered that you have to read the words on the top.
I think there are some words that are there that aren't really meant to be read. Quoting long passages from Proust or something, I don't know. But just to give a flavor somehow.
I tried to
Yeah.
read all the long passages. I tried to read everything.
Yeah, I
And
read.
even the copies of handwritten letters from her father to her when she was in college.
Well, so many of them are fragments too.
Mhm.
Well, I'm not an artist, but I've lived with one for 41 years, so I know a little bit about it. And one of the things that I know Pat always talks about in looking at a painting is, where is the artist wanting me to look first? The composition tells me where to look first. And I think a good composition of any sort, including a cartoon, does the same thing, and it'll pull your eye to what's the most important, and the words may be or may not be in a particular frame. And then after you've hit the main focus, then your eyes are free to roam around and find some of those fun little things that she does with, sticking sunbeam bread everywhere.
Yeah.
Even in the gas station window, there was the sunbeam bread.
Yeah, right. Sunbeam, which was the truck that ran over her father, right? So that was an important symbol.
I'm glad you told me that. I didn't notice that.
Well, I was at one point sort of surprised at all the literature references, and I, including things I have never read. So that I was wondering how much I missed because of that.
I haven't read it in quite some years, so I remember getting stuck kind of on the whole Ulysses thing.
Yeah.
I've subsequently read Ulysses by James Joyce several times. And as I recall, there's kind of a Ulysses and a Homer, kind of thing going on. But the idea in Ulysses by James Joyce of Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus, the kind of this father and child, father and son thing, I think probably has a print on Fun Home. And in addition to that, Odysseus, the Odyssey, where he's just trying to get home. He's trying to get back to Ithaca. And I don't know enough about this this novel to say more than I just think every great novel, every great work, somewhere there's a line of trying to find home.
I'm confessing I have the book, but I haven't read it yet because I've been having vision issues. So it's the first thing it's going to get read when my vision clears up. So I'm just listening, but I'm getting more excited at the moment as the time passes, hearing about your reactions to all this.
It's an experience, definitely.
A little like watching a movie for me. We talked about the separation of the text and the visual, but in a way it's kind of a 360. You're kind of moving, and you think of storyboarding in a film, and to what degree she storyboarded the way that the story was going to unfold, and how much she knew where she was going to land the story, which I think is kind of also a question for Anna of like how much of it is improvisation and the story is telling you how it wants to be created, and how clearly do you know where you want to land? I mean, do you storyboard your comics?
Sometimes I do, and mostly I don't. I used to do it more. I used to storyboard a lot more, and now I like to just see where it takes me. And so I just put the pen to the paper and I just start, and I don't really plan the page out necessarily. Sometimes I'll go back and I'll say, oh, now that I've written the whole story out, I can see how it could be better, and I'll go back and redraw it. But I always start now just doing it and seeing where it takes me in a more of an improvisational way. But I feel like Alison Bechdel, I mean, clearly she planned this out, and there's so many references like sunbeam bread and all the things that she sprinkles in the rhythm of it. It does feel more, it's closer to a movie than it is to a text novel.
And with close-ups and where your eye is being directed
And
and
there's
how
a
the
real rhythm.
setting, the physical setting and the,
Well, you know, even if in writers and people who are only engaged in one particular direction of words, there are those who plan everything out and have it all outlined before
Right.
they ever pick up pen to write. And then there are those who start writing, and when they get done, they're done. And they may go back and revise, of course, but I think it's the person's way of working, be it visual or verbal.
And you know, on the opposite, as the reader or seer, I still haven't figured. I got the book out and started looking at things and figured which am I doing first, and I still can't tell you. So I think it's a combination of things for me with the way I took it in.
I usually read the words first, and they were placed where, you know, that was the first thing you come to, and it usually helped focus the picture.
But the opposite is also true.
Yeah, and then I have to go back and forth. Right.
Right.
Yeah. In some ways, this was not so different for me because I'm used to picture books for kids, where the picture is very important. It's very much part of the story. But I don't think I've read one where an adult book.
Yeah, my past experience with graphic novels was basically reading things that kids in junior high and high school were reading long ago, and those didn't really interest me. but this grabs one and pulls you in.
does anyone know, was there kind of a breakthrough? I'm going to continue to use the word graphic novel. Was there kind of a breakthrough one that crossed over to a large reading audience? You know, I'm thinking of like Mouse.
That's all I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Yeah, if you've read one graphic novel. Sorry?
Yeah, I think
Mouse
Mouse
is
was
one that got a lot of people interested.
Yeah. Right.
And a lot of people think of illustrated, the classics illustrated as graphic novels, and that ruins it, I think. Yeah.
it's not quite the same as something that's created to be
Right.
a graphic novel. I do think Mouse was one of, like, if not the main one that crossed over. He was in Williamstown several years ago. He did a presentation at Williams that was free, where he had a big projector and he projected images and talked about creating Mouse, and kind of did a reading with these big projections of the images. That was really great to hear him talk about that. Art Spiegelman talking about
Was it really about a mouse? What is Mouse?
Oh no, it's about the Holocaust. I have it.
Oh.
I have it right here.
MAUS.
Oh, the German. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
It's in two parts.
Oh, I see.
So he draws the Jews are mice and the Germans are cats.
Oh.
Each different nationality is a different animal. And it's about his family's history. It's about his father and his grandfather. And yeah.
Oh, how interesting. I really would like to look at that.
The way that he draws these little mice characters, like it's so simple. But that inspired me so much, just how much emotion he conveys in these little mice faces. It's beautiful. So yeah.
Who wrote that? Who's the author?
Art Spiegelman. I can type it into the chat too.
Art Spiegelman. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
When did that book come out, Mouse, in the US?
Oh, that's quite a
Oh.
while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had not heard of it.
20 years.
Oh, 1973 is when
Oh
it
my
first was
Oh,
published.
long
50
time.
years ago. Oh my gosh.
Well,
You mean
it's
graphic novels have been around that long?
Yeah.
And before that, I mean, people have been making, because there's always been the superhero stuff, right? Which I'm not really into either. But Archie comics since like the 30s, and
Yeah, but that's a different thing, isn't
it's
it?
a different thing. But while all that was going on, there were so many artists making underground comics,
Right.
which are more this kind of thing, which are much more what I'm drawn to. Like yours, like I think Suzanne was saying she's like not into the stuff that the like junior high and high school kids are reading. Like I'm not really into Superman, Spider-Man, that kind of stuff. But the graphic novel community, which is kind of called the indie comics community, it's kind of what it's called. But back before like the 50s and stuff, it was called underground comics. And there was a lot of different kind of stuff going on that just didn't hit the mainstream until Mouse really was like, here, look, we can take these seriously. This is real art. This isn't just drugstore kid stuff. This is a, you know, something for people to pay attention to and fighting to get it like taken seriously in the literary world.
Very interesting.
A couple of things that I felt were kind of left out of this memoir. I wish she had talked a little bit more about her art, growing up and loving art and doodling and drawing. And I mean, she does devote some, you know, some panels to it, but also it's almost like her brothers aren't in this memoir. She
Yeah.
had two brothers, but I mean, I know it's, you know, it's really about her father, her and her father and her mother, but I kind of missed the brothers.
Has anybody read Are You My Mother? I wonder if there's more about that in there.
Yeah,
That was one of Anna's picks.
I love it. Well, it's a big part of Are You My Mother is about her conversations with her mother while she was writing Fun Home. And how her relationship with her mother changed. And I know in Fun Home, you know, it's the limited color palette with just the blues, the bluish grays. And in Are You My Mother, it's sort of pink and gray color palette. But I don't remember there being as much about her brothers in there, but there is a lot about her relationship with her mother, and then her mother and her talking a lot about her making Fun Home, because she would show it to her mom. And there's some great, this is all just her in therapy, which are some great therapy panels in Are You My Mother?
Have you seen The Secret to Superhuman Strength yet? It's just out. Her new
I
book.
haven't seen it yet, not in person.
There's a Fresh Air interview. I think Ruth, Ruth Olson, you said you heard that too, right?
I did. Suddenly her name seemed to be everywhere.
I know.
The publication of her new book. It just
Yeah.
or just coming out, maybe.
Yeah.
It's apparently about her exercise addiction.
Yes.
Oh.
So are these three books, Fun Home and Are You My Mother, and the new one about exercise addiction, is this I mean, is this sort of like her therapy, maybe?
It takes her like 7 years to write one of these things. So I don't know.
I would guess probably. I find it's always like therapy for me, like for sure.
I think most crazy novelists would tell you that writing a novel is their therapy too.
It's a great way to get it out. I don't know if anybody reads or watches the Outlander series, but I like super addicted to it. But I've been rewatching the show, and the character Chen Cho, Mr. Willoughby, says, as he holds his life story in his hand on the boat, he says, "A story told is a life lived. And once I tell my story, I have to let it go." And that makes me think of like, yeah, once you make it, it comes out of your body. And then it's on a page, and then you can let it go rather than holding on to it and maybe like festering. But when you tell your story, I think that's basically what therapy is, I think. Or much of it is just about telling your own story and being heard.
Rings true.
I was reading a review earlier today of Fun Home in the New York Times, and the writer said, it's the first time I've ever read a comic that I had to go look words up in the dictionary,
Yeah.
which I thought was great.
Or literary references, that would be
Yeah.
the other one.
Yeah.
The literary stuff was hard for me to understand some of
Yeah.
it. So.
Me
Yeah.
too.
Sagged a little bit. But, back to crossover, we talked about Mouse, and I think with Fun Home, to have been turned into a musical and to have won the Tony for the best musical, I mean, for the LGBTQ, that community, a huge thing, but to turn a graphic novel into a musical and to have it receive such prestige, I think she's really cracked open, book groups all over America are probably reading graphic novels now. And we're going to see more and more plays based on their stories. We've come a long way. We were talking about the history of comics. Remember R. Crumb? Underground comics, Keep on Trucking. Some of us are old enough to remember that whole kind of Haight Ashbury, the drugs, that Mr. Natural and so on. Hop, skip, and jump from the underground into something like Mouse, to something like, I think another milestone might have been Persepolis.
Mm-hmm.
That was
I
a
saw
series
that too.
about
I
that.
love Marjan Satrapi is.
Yeah, exactly. And that's about the girl and her family in Iran, and the change that they had to go through, and
Oh, big, yeah. And she's got some other, Big Chicken with Plums is like about her grandfather, which is also spectacular. Yeah, I love her work so much. And this is a movie now too, but
an animated movie.
Mhm.
Has anyone seen the play Fun Home?
No.
Oh, I would have loved to. I have some friends who saw it and they said it was the best thing they'd ever seen on Broadway.
Oh my.
But I have
Legend.
not seen it.
Maybe Old Castle can play.
You should suggest it.
Put on a show.
And was that about the greatest title?
Yes, wonderful, wonderful title. I love it.
Yeah.
And I love laughing at death, I guess, or something. I just
Me
think
too.
it's, there's something refreshing about not taking it too seriously, or what?
Yeah, she and her brother were laughing, I think, weren't they? Yeah. I don't think her father killed himself.
You don't.
You don't?
No. What does anybody else think?
I think he did.
Yeah.
Well, say more, Thea. Why do you think that?
He had started to renovate a second home. He spent 30 years renovating this beautiful Gothic revival home. And then he bought a farmhouse out in the country, and he had started renovating that. And it seems like someone who has all this enthusiasm for taking on a large new project is not going to kill himself. And I think he was walking across the road to dump the brush, in a ditch across from the home. And I think she suggested in the graphic memoir that he might have been startled by a snake. And I'm going with that. I don't buy that he would kill himself, when he had this great new project to get into and look forward to.
I think you argued your point well. Good point.
How does everyone else feel?
Well, you could turn that around too. He thought it would be good for him. He embarked on it and it just was empty. And if that didn't excite him, then nothing would. And what else was worth living for?
Good point.
Good counterpoint.
It might have been a last minute decision, the truck was coming and it was handy and he had thought about it sometimes and okay, now I'm going to do it, or some type of thing. I don't know.
She leaves it open to interpretation, even she's not sure, I bet.
Yeah, I don't think so. Although she talked about it as a suicide, didn't she? She referred to it later as his suicide, didn't she?
Sort of tentative.
Yeah.
Herself for it.
Yeah.
Because it happened just about the time that she announced that she was gay. And so she blamed her coming out to her father.
Oh,
dying.
but she already knew that her father was gay.
But he didn't
She-
know about her.
She could be wrong.
Not him yet, I don't think, did she?
I thought she was surprised by the information that came out with her revelation.
Right.
Mother told her, right, afterwards?
Yeah,
Yes, after she came out.
I
yeah.
got that impression that, and of course, as you look back in time, it's hard to know when one thing came before the other, but
Mhm, right.
the impression she gives in the book, I think.
Mhm.
Mm.
So that, but it is interesting that we don't know. And
Yes,
I leave it saying, I think he did commit suicide. But I'm not sure.
How does the ending fit in? He saves her when she jumps into the pool.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, the thing that seems to be most important to her, which it ends with, is that he was there to catch her.
Yeah.
Right.
And what happened afterwards maybe wasn't as important.
Yep. Yep. And going back a few conversations ago, although her mother is more dominant than her brothers, I think, in the novel, it was clear to me when I was reading it that I wasn't learning a whole lot about her mother, but I was learning a lot of her father.
mhm.
And the picture on the front is interesting because it's just Alison and her father, sort of one looking forward, one looking away. So there's no connection except they're sitting on the same porch.
You have a different picture on the front than I do.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
this is mine.
Yeah,
It's the children.
that's the same one.
Yeah.
We had all different pictures on the front.
Yeah, well,
This one shows, mine shows everybody except the mother.
Oh, I think that is the mother.
Oh, that is the mother in the back.
That is the mother with
Everybody
the
that-
3
other
children.
than the father, right.
Yeah, the father is not there,
The father's not there.
which is
Right.
curious.
Well, this one is Alison and her father.
yeah, and that's,
So the book exists with 2 different covers or 3 different covers.
yes.
Yep, yep.
Of
Interesting.
course, that may not be the author's choice.
That's true.
Typically,
Yeah, probably the publishers,
Yeah,
each edition. I like how well, because mine's without the book jacket. I think mine had what I think a lot of you have with the picture of just her and her father before I took the book jacket off, and it has just this picture of the house underneath. But the Are You My Mother one, like the book jacket cover is like a makeup vanity,
Yeah,
but then underneath it, it's her and her grandmother.
oh,
Or her, I think she's taking a picture of, I think this is her, I don't know if this is her or her mother, but yeah, that's sort of an interesting,
Hmm.
but this is her grandmother and her mother, and then her mother and her. Which is
You
kind
know
of
that the
interesting.
title of that book and the typeface of the title comes from the children's book, Are You My Mother?
Yeah,
Does it really?
It does.
I was wondering about that because that's all that I can picture when
Yep,
I hear you
yeah.
mention that title.
P.D.
that's
Eastman.
the children's book.
Who wrote that? I can't remember.
P.D. Eastman.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Eastman.
Yeah.
right.
Right.
Yeah.
mhm.
And it's about identity.
Mhm.
is that the one where somebody's going around and asking all the other animals, are you my mother?
Yeah, the
Yes,
bird
right.
falls out of the nest and tries to find its mother.
Do you remember?
Yeah.
that?
And he goes to all sorts of creatures. And finally, his mother.
My children loved that book.
Yep.
I think you guys would definitely like the Are You My Mother? And I was just flipping through it, and the dedication says, "For my mother, who knows who she is,"
Oh,
which
Oh,
I kind of love.
Oh, and
interesting.
that's ambiguous.
And she calls this one I don't know if Fun Home has this in the beginning, but oh yeah, Fun Home is, the subtitle is A Family Tragicomic.
Yes.
Are You My Mother? The subtitle is A Comic Drama.
oh.
Sort of interesting.
Hmm. Who are they dedicated to? Do we know that? I don't.
I can tell you who Fun Home is. It's for Mom, Christian, and John. We did have a lot of fun in spite of everything.
Aha.
This is beautiful.
Yeah, that's,
In spite of everything. Interesting.
I wonder
Oh,
if
yeah, I see it. I see it.
I wonder if the North Shore will have her for a book tour of the new book.
oh, that would be good.
Yeah,
Well, she's been interviewed a whole lot on the new one.
I know.
I've,
Very nice. Same
I've
here.
seen interviews of her. I have Zoom interviews that I haven't done, but I've noticed 5 or 6 of them.
Is she out on a book tour for the new book?
Well, a Zoom tour.
A Zoom tour. Oh, okay.
If you just look her up, I think the Times had her. A lot of people have had her talking about her new one. Well, anybody have a final word you'd like to leave us with?
I don't think I'm going to give up real books.
That's a book.
Ooh.
I'm definitely gonna look for
I
it.
don't think they're fighting each other. They just both want to exist.
yeah,
I read
yeah.
fully text novels as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They
And-
can both be. They can both be there.
But I also would say after reading this, I wouldn't mind reading other graphic novels. That's,
Right, right.
Yeah, I'm going to
Where-
explore the
I-
shelf at the library that has, we have a shelf in our new book section of graphic books, and I'm definitely going to explore that. I hope they have mouse there. I'd like to start with that one.
They certainly will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It must be an awful lot of work for Alison Bechdel to not only write words, but also draw all those million pictures.
Yep.
And they're good pictures. But
Is she still doing her column Dykes to Watch Out For?
I don't think so.
I don't know if she still does that anymore. I don't know.
She talked about it in the interview
Yeah.
I watched today. But that was an old interview, so.
Yeah.
Okay, quick change of topic. Do we want to have a June meeting? A Zoom meeting, or just wait until the in-person in July?
Wait.
Wait, you zoomed out?
I'm not
Yes.
zoomed out. I would love to have a Zoom, another Zoom. Because I won't be there. I won't be there until July. But that's fine.
Okay, so we just take a break.
Do we have a book?
I don't have an idea. I don't have a book. I mean, we could find another a graphic one to read.
I was looking for a Mexican American one, but I can't, or a Latino one. We never did get there, but I couldn't in my own mind decide on one to recommend. So when you pick one, it's kind of hard.
I
I
thought
just read a great novel by a Dominican American woman, Angie Cruz,
Uh-huh.
Dominicana.
Oh.
I don't know if you're looking for someone from that region. It's a very beautiful. It's a text novel, but I just read that a couple months ago and I really loved it.
Angie, what?
Cruz, Cruz.
Sounds good. I just looked.
She's got a couple of books, but that's the one I read and I loved it. Dominicana.
It's historic.
What did you like about it?
Well, I love historical fiction and like family, like it's not historical fiction really, but it takes place during the 50s. And this family who sort of moves from the Dominican Republic to New York City. So it's sort of a family story about some different people based on centers on this one woman kind of coming marries this man and comes to New York, and it's about kind of her life as an immigrant. The prose is beautiful, and I found it to be a really interesting story too.
Okay, sold. Anybody wants to do it? We'll do it the third Thursday in June, and
Great.
that'll be our final
June.
hurrah.
All right.
Anna,
Americana or Dominicana. is what it's called.
Dominicana.
Yeah, I just typed it into the chat.
okay, Dominicana by Angie Cruz.
Angie
Is
Cruz.
is it in paperback yet, or is it?
Yeah,
new?
I have it. I think so. It's a
Okay.
newer book, but I think it's out in paperback now. And I've been using thrift books. I've been reading so much the past year, just getting so many books, novels. But I got it from Thrift Books, which is like used books online if you can't find it at a local bookstore. But I think it should hopefully be at local libraries and bookstores too. I don't know.
Good. Great.
Everybody good?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's in paperback on Amazon.
Oh no, I don't
Wait.
know.
Thanks for coming, Anna. That was
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
This was really lovely, and
Thank
it's
you.
great to see and meet you all. And this was a really great
Tell you
conversation.
how much we really love your cartoons.
Thank you. I love making them. I'm working on my next one now. So
Well, we will certainly be happy to continue to publish whatever you send.
awesome.
And
If
join us.
The diversity theme has passed, we would continue to enjoy diversity or anything else you want to talk about.
Awesome. I'm
Yeah,
honored.
If you
I
have
think
time-
it's wonderful to have a cartoon in the newsletter.
if you have time next month, join us to discuss the book you just recommended.
All right, keep me on the list. Keep me on the email list.
Okay, thanks.
Great to see everybody. Thanks,
Thank you,
Anna.
Anna.
Bye.
Guys, don't forget, June 19, Juneteenth
Right.
is the
Picnic.
picnic, and we're gonna have a little annual meeting. We have to elect officers. So,
Okay.
adios.
Bye.
Adios.
It was fun.
Good luck with your eyes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.